Hi, everyone. This is Wendy and you're listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters. And I have Alan Ramsay here with me today for our discussion today. Nice to have you with us, Alan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We got to meet over 12 months ago when I started hearing about the work that you were doing and very curious and interested. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you again about what you do.
Yeah, look, I'm always happy to talk about things that interest me, and this is something I'm really passionate about, and I think a lot of your listeners will be too, hopefully.
Yes, beautiful. All right. Well, I know your background, but our listeners don't. So allow me just a minute or so to introduce Alan to you all. So Alan Ramsay is a nurse academic and researcher who says nurses don't need more wellness sessions, resilience workshops, or moral distress lectures to survive their job. The problem isn't the nurse, it's the system. Are we, and I'll take your vernacular here, a wee bit of honesty goes a long way, and I align with because I've actually got Scottish genes in me as well. With experience in acute trauma and cardiac nursing, he now focuses on helping early career nurses deal with what the job is actually like, not what the textbooks promised. He talks about the stuff that matters, how to speak up when something's off, how to be taken seriously, and how to hold your standards when everything is moving too fast. His work is about power, advocacy, and closing the gap between what nurses are expected to do and what they're actually supported to do. His aim is simple: help nurses find their voice and use it. Hence why you're here today. So that's a great summary of what I know about you, Alan. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay, so do you want me to talk a little bit about myself as a nurse? So I started nursing in 1992 in Scotland, as you can probably tell. I'm not Australian. Well, I am now. I've got an Australian passport. But
Rosie.
I started in 1992, and it was even then I was having thoughts that inform my research that I'm doing today, and that was the ideas of being a nurse and not having a powerful role, if that's the right word. But I remember telling my dad that I was going to become a nurse, and he literally dropped the cutlery. He was like, "What? Why?" And to give you just to frame that, and I kind of double checked about half an hour ago that in the United Kingdom, a nurse earns way less than the average wage. So that means everything in that society, you see, half of it is beyond your means. And if you're, I don't want to gender this, but if you're a man and you want to have a family and maybe your wife stays at home and looks after the kids, you're going to be almost getting as much the maximum benefits from the state, the equivalent of Centrelink in the United Kingdom. So it was like a real bit, and it kind of annoyed me. But I loved the job. I love being a nurse. I love being a nurse. I like it more in Australia. So I worked in United Kingdom in acute medicine, worked in trauma, and then sort of segued to cardiology. And I did a master's in nursing, which included cardiac nursing, research and education in Queensland at James Cook University, where I actually now work as an academic. But that's feeling that I had when I became a nurse, to really like the job, and then realized it wasn't quite the reality of being a nurse is actually really difficult. And it's way better here actually in Australia, but there's still quite a lot that needs to be done. Is that enough information about my kind of
No, that's quite highly credentialed. And James Cook, I didn't realize you were there. I thought you were somewhere else. So that's really interesting. I worked in Townsville for a number of years, so we were closely connected with James Cook up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that idea of, I don't know if it's too early to start talking about what I'm doing just now, but that idea of loving the job and appreciating that the context that we had to operate in was controlled by other people. And I never understood we were a profession, and yet it was always controlled by other people. And that's lived with me for a long time. And I'm doing a PhD now. I've pretty much finished that. It usually needs to be submitted. I've published from that as I'll be going along. But I thought if I wanted to change this, I wanted to give nurses more power. I mean, if someone gives you power, you've not really got power. You've got to take it. We've got to seize this opportunity that we've got to try and create some elbow room in the healthcare system for ourselves. I published a piece which comes from this bit here, Speaking Truth to Power, about advocacy in nursing, because I thought the idea of being able to speak up for your patient is really central to the role of a nurse. But can we actually do it? Do we have a system that supports it? Are the structural constraints or the power imbalances that exist, with nurses and doctors and the admin hierarchy, can we actually do anything about that? So, and I thought, how am I going to change this? We'll need to create evidence that it exists. And I've done a couple of things as part of my research. Two have been published. I've not published the data itself yet, but it speaks to that idea that nurses don't need to be fixed. It's the system that needs to be fixed. And I think we've kind of bought into the narrative that there's individual failings that nurses have that cause problems for us at work. And a lot of them stem from being overworked, having like medication errors and having these, sessions weaponized against us. A lot of the time it's because you've got too much to do. And it's a massive safety issue as well. So I look at patient safety and advocacy, and there's lots of big cases like in Bundaberg with Dr. Patel or Dr. Death, where nurses did notice what was going on and did everything right. There's the Mid-Staffordshire inquiry in the United Kingdom where thousands of people met an early death, So that was my first thing. So I found, Wayne did some research. And when I say research, it actually took me like a couple of hours on Google. And I found about 2,500 deaths, and every single one of those deaths were preceded by a nurse, usually a nurse, saying, usually to a doctor, stop, or to the system, stop, please stop. Like in Bundaberg, I'm being ignored and bullied and pressured and squeezed and pushed out to the margins. You may be working in ICU and they threaten to send you to the stroke ward or the rehab ward. The system does not want, it tells us, and I'm an educator now, and I've been doing this for 14 years now. And it happened to be when I was a student, you're told that you're an advocate of the patient, and there's this sort of really important central role that the reality is the system doesn't want you to speak out. The system.
We have a saying here in Australia, don't we, about tall poppies or, standing.
Yeah.
And we really don't support that nurse in being able to speak up.
Yeah, it's not, and the tools that they have, the system has, are things like wellness programs, the construct of moral distress. They've all been weaponized back onto nurses, and we kind of bought them. We went, oh yeah, maybe, and I'm suffering from moral distress, therefore I need to go work on myself. And probably the reality is the job needs to be better. There's very few other avenues of life in terms of professions that you're exposed to such great peril in terms of life and death situations when you're poorly or under-resourced. I just find it flabbergasting, and it kind of annoys me as well. I don't know if that's coming across, but I've tried to channel all that energy into doing something about it, because I was told 35 years ago when I was a student that we were the future. We should listen. We're the future. We can stop bullying. We can do all this. And I'm thinking, you know what? It's not the job of me to preach to young nurses about them creating power for themselves and wiggle room and elbow room to try. No. We need to work together on this, including older people like me. People who are in positions of leadership need to take responsibility for the way the profession's going. And even just now, that I think Standard 7 is a new standard for the APRA's come out, and it's called professionalism. And I'm like, what does that mean? It's a catch-all. It's a catch-all. I think it's, and look, I'm not mad into some of the ideas of politics at the moment, but it sounds terribly colonialist to me, because the idea of what is professionalism is very subjective, and I'm not happy. I want to see people say like they swore at the patient, or I want evidence that this is what happened. I just don't like the way he kind of operates, And I thought, it's at that level we need to be functioning now. We need to be articulating ourselves in a way that we can say, you know what, the profession needs to sort its game out. And again, maybe the profession doesn't need to fix itself. It's the system, it's the hospitals, it's the political will to stop using us as a political football. Depend who's in power, what happens, and whether new grads get posts or not, as this happened.
We talked in that a little bit before we started the podcast about all of these things that come into play, like offering wellness courses or whatever. It as an action to be taken from an incident involving a nurse. We're going to fix this by sending this nurse off to a program for them to be able to learn the skills to bring back and apply into their workplace, rather than actually looking at all of the other things that happened. Like you talk about the system, and if we actually put as much energy into the system, promoting more nurses, giving them time, all that, and the support to be able to do their jobs.
In doing my research, and also act as an industrial advocate for nurses who got themselves into trouble, but a lot of them have articulated these courses or been sent, to do remediation, have been weaponized. They're used as a threat, and they're used as a punishment for those who stick their head up. And again, as a profession, we've kind of we've bought into that idea as being it, and we've bought in because we're sold the idea that we're always going to be helpful. There's that mythology of what a nurse is, about how we're, virginal and goddess-like, and we're going to just sit and take it and not become disagreeable when we have to. We're just going to fall over, and all these things. I don't think I've spoken to anyone in my research or working in as an advocate who's talked about these resilience courses or wellness programs as being anything but used to beat them over the head with. They're not there to help them have tools to deal with the situation. They're there just to make it's a tick box exercise. They've done something, they've sent you on a course. And like that, actually resilience is something that's really interesting, because where I am in university, we talk about resilience training. And I'm like, so we're going to train them to accept the intolerable. We're going to train them to actually forget who they are, that they're a daughter, a wife, a mother, an important person with their own emotional baggage that they shouldn't be carrying home with them every single day. And emotional resilience, I've been speaking to people in the education sector. I'm saying to you, the resilience thing is, the resilient people have already walked away from this profession. Anyone with any resilience walks away. It's only crazy people like me who love the job. I don't think I could do any other job. I'm not saying I'm the best nurse in the world, but I love what I do. I like to walk away thinking I've done something decent with my time. I love it.
We're having this discussion last week with some colleagues about a project that we're doing later this year, and we're actually talking about the whole question of resilience. What does it actually mean? Because it's a really ambiguous, and I can't say that word, ambiguous title. What does resilience actually mean? Does resilience mean that you do develop the bandwidth in your own skill, personality mix to be able to tolerate, as you said, something that's unacceptable? Is resilience confidence to be able to walk away and hold your head up high? Or what does that actually mean? And does it mean different things to different people?
See when I get to where you're at, right, I take the words and apply them to engineering, right? Because they give you really clear ideas. So resilience would be the capacity to be bent and not break. Yeah. So we're teaching people, human beings, to be malleable, that we can flex them, but not break them. Now, every time you bend someone, it does not return back to the right position, unless it's got ductile or tensile strength, if you're an engineer or not, right? But they'll talk about different types of metals having specific, like titanium's got strengths of this kind. But really, do we want to be borrowing that kind of language that comes from this even not, dealing with stress? It's that something that's applied to you and how you can cope with it. What's the, and you're like, well, they're all not good ones. They're dressed up as being, you positive, proactively do. But resilience is not a good thing. It's not good. No one talking about human beings here who have to go back to their families, their husbands and their wives and their children, having been bent by a system that's teaching them, and the system self-teaches itself, and the management and whatever else in it, that we need to, learn how to split such. Wendy can be bent today without breaking. So exactly. I can't think of anything. I don't know how to use other allegories, other ways of talking about it. But sometimes you have to, because we've normalized them so much yourself. That when I say normalized, I mean we've just accepted them. That's what resilience wants from you. That's what wellness programs want you. We don't mind you having inner turmoil. Just don't express it at work. Lock yourself off. Have a breakdown at home. Think of people with mental health problems, alcoholism, within nursing, and you're thinking, no wonder we got a system that wants to treat us like this.
And we get so many nurses now entering the profession, and then, a few months after they've actually graduated, going scratching their heads, going, and this is exactly some of the work that you're doing is what I was led to believe was going to be this profession actually turned out to be something completely different. And we're talking broadly here. There are units that work really, really well, but generally speaking, like we are in a bit of a crisis here with nurses and retention and all this sort of thing. So can you talk about some of the work that you've done with like our early career nurses?
I teach law and ethics to nursing students, and I try to teach in a way that is about their obligations as nurses, ethically, legally. But also the other side is that how we can actually use these ourselves. I frequently have to defend nurses where we're using the standards for practice. And I'm like, this nurse was doing this as we're only following this standard, and I just why I've got a problem with this. I appreciate that it's had some impact on other things within that day in that particular ward. But I mean, do you want me to phone APRA and tell them the nursing standards are wrong? Or do we just accept that this is what happens when there's conflicting demands being placed on a nurse? Sometimes they choose, and they're maybe not chosen the one that you would like them to choose. So I'm only using that as an explanation of how, without you enrolling in one of my courses, to help junior nurses, or in this case undergraduates, to develop the and doing those skills, and it's really in critical thinking, whatever that is. It's about the ways of thinking and operating that can help you create some power in the way that you're talking, and not being too apologetic. Because sometimes you have to be some of the quite like email, for example. We didn't have email when I was younger. And you would maybe speak to a manager about something, and a week later they would just deny all knowledge of it. We've got email. Email is an incredibly powerful tool. You can just say, "What happened last night? Just I'd like this happened. This is the impact of it. Can we talk about this sometime?" And just leave it hanging there. And there's actually been some really interesting cases where it's a matter of public record, but I won't get to do much detail, where there was you can Google this, you'll find it now actually, $1.2 million settlement with one of the state healthcare providers in Australia, where a nurse was being bullied by the person above them and below them in the hierarchy. And they'd emailed the right people with what was happening and how it was affecting her health. And at the summation, the judge normally says, I normally wouldn't give someone 1.2 million if that's where they'd worked out what they needed to get them out of the hole they were in. I normally would maybe say 50% of the blame might be shared with a nurse for not doing the right thing. But he gave 100% of the claim because he said, I've not seen an email response to any of these emails. I think actually literally there was none, but let's be kind to them. It might have been an inadequate response, but it was enough for them to frame it like, this person's written to you like 20 times in 18 months. Clearly they were recruited to a role. The person below them wanted that job. The person that above them wanted that person in this role. I don't know if my fingers are working out there, but it's very powerful. You got a great, you can say, I'm going to document it. No, you're right. Yeah, do that, whatever you want to do. But also I would be emailing your line manager and letting them know, I'm a bit concerned about this. Using your union as well, speaking to your reps to try and create some leverage that works. So I'm doing a lot on an individual basis, and also do a little bit in trying to do that with undergraduate nurses without putting the burden on them as it was with, I don't know what happened to you, Wendy, but we were like, well, you're the new generation of nurses and you can go out there and change it. And I'm like, you know, in your ivory towers at one of the first universities I was teaching nursing in Scotland, and you're thinking, well, this is not my responsibility, is it? And I don't think much has changed in some of these areas. Across the board, this idea of nurses having power to speak up and defend themselves and not be pushed around emotionally or otherwise hasn't definitely improved over the last 30 years or so. But every now and then, too often, it shows that it really hasn't, and it's just, and people die. And I was like, and I used that idea of how many people died when a nurse had said stop, because I don't think the general public realise how much peril or danger they are in when they go into a hospital that doesn't listen to the nurses, and it's a safety issue as well. So maybe talking around there, but it's not a problem if nurses are listening to this. Oh, yeah. Get all that. But we need to take that, and I think we need to take it to the public. The public need to know, because I think that's going to create some more power for us, is if they realise how dangerous it is for them to go into a hospital when nurses are not, like Bundaberg, that farce in that hospital. 63 people, 62 people.
Something like that.
And
I actually interviewed Tony Hoffman a few weeks ago, so that's on the podcast if you want to listen to that. I was actually going to make a comment here about our career nurses, because in the last few years that I worked, I did some clinical teaching, and definitely, like, I think the new nurses, they're confident in speaking up, but it's the language that they're using that is often not received very well. And whereas, like, when you and I trained, we had 3 years in a hospital to observe some of the language, and we cherry pick what we put in our own repertoire so that we develop those skills along the way from the team. And I personally, very hard for nurses to come out after 3 years and hit the wards as a registered nurse to have that skill set. It's very rare that you actually get a nurse that has that skill set to be able to do that. And that for me is a concern.
I think a lot. I don't think I'm a superficial thinker, but I don't think I could thrive with the way the nurses are trained now, where you don't have that level of experience. I like to do things quite repetitively to get them to be absorbed, and I like that feeling of being, socialized into the workplace. Something you said there was interesting. So we maybe picked up ways of speaking. That I wonder if some of that is a little bit like that resilience thing, where we kind of picked our battles. We knew we kind of understood the cultural norms there, that you cannot take on a doctor. It's almost impossible. On issues where they should be getting called out, and that's maybe where we have to be a little bit more careful about how we do it. But we should still be able to do that. It's kind of frightening sometimes, but I think I again, because I work for a university, I don't want to make a comment about the way that nurses are trained in Australia, but I think it's hard to hit the ground running and have the kind of the skill to be able to speak up.
Absolutely. And to get that support, like be credible enough with your own data set for that client, for that patient scenario, but also to have the support around you when you do actually speak up, that you're not actually doing that by yourself. It's a very, very challenging thing to do to be able to get the outcome that you want.
A lot of the work, a lot of the coaching that I do with people who've maybe got into trouble at work, usually I've never supported someone I thought they'd deliberately done anything wrong. It's just managing the expectations of the formal disciplinary process and how to talk, and not to be reactive and fall into the traps they're setting for you. And that's the kind of stuff I guess you get from life experience against. But it's about not falling into the trap of being defensive and feeling you got to defend everything. You can just go, all right, okay, that's interesting. I won't get into too much detail, but that would probably get a bit muddy, I think. But it's certainly something that I try to inoculate my students with, that way of thinking about how they behave when things go wrong. Some of the worst cases that I've been around is where, when a nurse does something wrong, not what they did up to the point that they realised something that had gone wrong, it's what they did afterwards. And one of the few who's actually just lost a registration, and I think was never allowed to work in the care sector either, again, was the thing that she did wrong was terrible. She gave a blood transfusion to the wrong person, but that was a mistake. What she did later, she could have just thrown her hands up and walked away. But she tried to lie, get junior nurses to lie for her and stuff like that. And it's about that. So they're like, no. So you're going to make mistakes. We appreciate that. It's what you do afterwards, and show them how the law supports you. That to be criminally convicted, you need to show intent. Showing intent is really difficult. You want to keep yourself over in the civil side of the courthouse, right? As a civil matter, and that will be settled outside court anyway by your employer and maybe APRA if they don't know what to do with you. But it's a matter of civil tort-based law. It's not, you're not going to go to jail for this. You're not going to, but as soon as you start to do things that look intentional, like lying, fabricating evidence, getting people to lie for you. So, and there's some really good cases that can draw on in the classroom, but I can say, so, and I'm not teaching them how to do what to do when things go catastrophically wrong, which I might be, but it's just having that thinking behind things so that somewhere they can acknowledge internally, at least, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to make mistakes. Deal with that now. What are you going to do? And you go, own it. And I've worked in wards where the managers should say, oh, great, we've got another mistake. And you're like, well, why? I said, well, look, we've had none for the past 6 months. That looks really suspicious. There's wards that are doing worse than us, but I think we're just about the same. I don't think we're any more careful. And it looks, and oh, okay, yeah, I'll do some more if you want. No, we don't need more mistakes. But having that sort of positive framing things in the right way. This is a safety issue. Let's deal with it the right way, and not make them feel they've got to go on some silly course. It can just be like just remember and check, anticoagulants every day, just in case they're not being given. Because that can be dangerous. Oh.
One of the other things too is that it doesn't need to have a mistake happen. It's a near miss, isn't it? There's a lot of nurses that will not record a near miss or communicate a near miss because it is a perception of others that that we've nearly done the wrong thing or someone else is to blame and all that sort of thing. And it's usually because of a sequence of events. We've all had that training that in the risk management classes that it's not just one thing, it's a whole sequence of things that leads up to it. But declaring a near miss in your work unit actually exposes or gives you the opportunity to have a look at what are the things that led up to that and really do, I'm going to use the word forensic on that near miss to be able to identify what actually happened in the sequence of all those things. But it's the confidence for nurses to speak up, to declare that is what I find really frustrating because I'm pretty much an outspoken person when I worked, when it's right, I spoke up.
So there's almost a cultural anxiety in nursing to that. There's a sort of anxiety about, appearing like you don't know what you're doing or admitting you're wrong. And one of the chapters in my PhD, I don't know if the name will persist, but I'll share it with you. And it's called Snitches Get Stitches. So I've done a lot of this background stuff, which even goes back to the mythology of women, and some of the goddesses were just binned about 3,000 years ago. But it's that idea that we're incredibly evil to each other if we perceive that you're stepping outside of the social norms of the team, and to draw attention to a mistake by the team or a member of that team is, and I think my heart rate's going up thinking about this. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's good that we've got such unity, but our unity is so quickly displaced when there's a perception that's you get the idea of snitches get stitches. I think it's more of an Australianism than it is a Scottish one. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's American. I don't know. But that idea that we're all here together. We're going to do a due job. Blah blah blah. But we're very critical of each other. And some of the research that I've done and some of the looking at other historical events tends to suggest that in itself is system based. So, and if I can not spend too much time on this, but it's something I'm really interested in, is the idea when you're in a position where you've got a lot of responsibility and no authority, right? Classic symptoms for that type of behavior, that lateral bullying. You know you can't take your problems up. You maybe get limited resources to push it down. There's maybe nobody there. So you do it to each other. It's lateral bullying. And, one of the people I write with, Dr. Peter Harton, he does a lot on bullying, and he's kind of helped me in a way that we've kind of taken some of the wisdoms that he explored a few years ago. And that's like, well, is this just another system issue, like a symptom of the system, rather than that nurses aren't any more bitchy than anyone else, but you throw them into that system where you've got very little authority and all that responsibility. It creates it in they deliberately use it in the army. Armies throughout the world have used it. They use that sort of system where you can only talk to the person above you, your line manager. Go back to your line manager. Says you can only do this. The person who doesn't actually know what's happening up here. You don't know what the strategic intent for the business is. You don't know. You just walk it. You're in this little bit, so it goes sideways. You take it out on each other. Classic system loves it because it creates silence. So everything goes back to this idea of silence. And I use advocacy in some senses almost to make it more explicable to someone, to explain it and explain advocacy is about patient safety, and the system doesn't let us do it. And how could you segue from nurses bullying each other to advocacy? But it's there. Like, you can see it. Once I've written that chapter, I went, oh man, has no one ever thought of this before? I went back. There's just some that actual hierarchy that's used in nursing, and it's used almost everywhere now. So I'm not saying it's specific to nursing, but was modelled by Hitler Youth. It's modelled by every army, every guerrilla warfare tactics use this system. It keeps dissent down and keeps rationalizes silence, reduces dissent. Everyone's in this little box, and it's not a gendered thing. It's not. It doesn't make women into bitches. I was offended by that language, but that's the kind of thing that happens. It becomes that internalized lateral violence, as they call it now.
Well, when you feel cornered, you've got no choice you go into that survival mode, don't you? And
yes, and there's plenty of biological, if someone's got really low blood sugar, they're a bit hangry, as used to call it, they become a little more combative. They'll fight you, picking on the first thing they can find about you physically or emotionally, or some fracture within your personality, and they'll pick on that and they'll destroy and bring you down. This is the new stuff. The stuff out there, we don't seem to be borrowing from some of these other areas of the epistemology to actually back up the thinking and knowledge. And I think we should, because if we can create enough evidence, like I would like to challenge, I've not seen it all. I mentioned that this new standard 7 professionalism. I thought, I don't think, I maybe should read it in more depth when it comes out, but I think the time to speak to APRA about it, NMB is gone, but I think things like that is how we're going to tackle it, trying to get...
I was just going to ask, if you had if you could fix this, what would be your strategy? What would you like to see happen?
I think the implementation needs to be at that level. We can no longer blame nurses at the bottom and trying to educate it out of young people and blame it on them. The world is a crazy enough place for everybody. I think since 9/11 and watching planes flying into towers and stuff, I think I like the new generation of nurses that we're getting through. They're very rational, much more rational than maybe I was at that age. But they see hypocrisy. And I love the fact they see it, because they see it just as clearly as I did 35 years ago. And when I speak to colleagues of mine, I do seminars, and people are like, no, it's not really that bad. It's not really that. They say that they become defensive and twitchy. A bit like that, snitches get stitches. How dare you talk down in our profession? No, I'm not talking down about it. It's a fantastic profession. But the system...
Talking wisely.
Yeah, it's squeezing us down, and it's like, you're not allowed to talk about this anymore. I mean, so even I've been silenced, and I have. But people have tried to close me down and say, you shouldn't be talking about this, Alan. This doesn't happen. And then, boom, happens again.
That's why the podcast exists, because it's all about open communication. Let's talk about this. Let's get it out there in the open so that we can have nurses well into future generations and good nurses moving forward. Yeah.
So I think that you hinted on it there. We need to change things like the standards for practice, so that I think that not replacing number 7, professionalism, but I think there should be a standard that reflects that. And I'll just shorten this. It's not how I would write it, but the standard should say something like, all senior nurses are responsible for what they see or hear and do nothing about. right? Because because I can go in to disciplinary then with someone, or even try to furnish them with the facts. I don't want people to go to disciplinaries. I want to write a little email and just say, what do you thought about this? And they usually go, all right, okay, we'll let this one go this time, Alan. That's great. But that idea of having I'm trying to think of how I can phrase this, but then I use this in class. I say, like, a Stanford practice is something you can be hit over the head with, or something you can use to support your practice. And I'd love to have that to see, because usually the other person in the room is a nurse. And I'll say, all right, so this particular nurse we're supporting, who's done this wrong, is this the first time this has happened? I couldn't comment. I didn't ask that. I didn't ask you to comment about other cases. I'm asking you specifically, is this the first time? And they go, no. All right, what have you done to stop this happening? All right, so you realize this is notifiable conduct to APRA. That you're using the systems and processes to weaponize your HR against this nurse for something systemically happens quite often. And some people say to me, oh yeah, but we've already got that. We've already got that. And some of the state employers maybe have got stuff like that, but they're routinely ignored. We have to have the tools when we get down to that hand-to-hand combat. We can just say, is this the first time this has happened? And use that. So it's not just that, not just about standards. It's also getting politicians on our side to try and make things happen. And just before I forget to say this, because you were asking, I think we need some big wins. We need some bigger wins.
Yeah.
Tony Hoffman's a good one.
Yes.
That was a draw. Tony Hoffman personally won, right? But it was such a dirty campaign that she fought.
And she's still fighting, like it's
20
plus years on.
Yeah. I mean, like, I worked with Tony. We're both interested in ethics. She was one of the first nurses in Australia to formally study ethics. And then that happened to her. It's terrible circumstances, but, good on her. She was there. She knew what she had to do. And probably every nurse that was there probably knew that didn't weren't as brave as her. And my goodness.
She went on her own.
Yeah.
Do something about it.
It's what he said. She used journalists and politicians to create that leverage. Can we not do that within the professional system as it exists? No, I don't know. But that was that other thing. I think we need some scalps. We need a situation where a nurse has taken on someone and won. In 21, I'm not saying she didn't, but much more emphatically, demonstrably, quicker. And with outcomes that patients, we don't have to wait till the 60-second patient dies early for things to happen.
And provide a safe environment for that nurse to be able to do that. So that pathway to making it known to speak up is actually resistance reduced.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right, Alan, what one gold nugget would you like to give to our nurses out there? Think of our broad audience. We've got new nurses that are coming out. We've got nurses that have been working for 10 years. We've got nurses coming up to retirement. What's the one gold nugget that you'd like to pass on to them?
Oh, man. I think I've used all my best ones, right? I've always used all my best ones so far, which is that idea of, finding your voice and speaking out, and finding ways of doing that. But I think probably, despite everything I've said, nursing is a great profession, right? It's an absolutely brilliant profession. And I hope no one watches this and thinks, oh my goodness, I don't want to become a nurse. It sounds terrible. It's got so many trade-offs. I love doing it. I just think the system, the context that we're doing needs to be better. And we need to work so much harder to avoid falling into these traps, whether it's at disciplinaries or whether it's stitches thinking and perceiving everything as a slight against ourselves personally. And I'm going to avoid the word bullying, but I've just said it. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, to be honest. I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right. I from what you've told me and what discussions we've had private too is, we're out there to support each other. Goodness me, up, down, sideways, no matter where you work, and to get a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah. But yeah, look, I think we need to speak out, and that's behind my head. It says here, speak truth to power. Speak out. Speak out when it's safe to do so. And when you hear of a nurse speaking out, stand beside them. You don't have to say anything. Just stand with them. If you say something even better, but to keep the momentum going. In a couple of workplaces I've worked in, we've won. We've won on by multiple small things being pushed forward at the same time, and people went. And I'm going, this is a pattern recognition issue for this hospital. We need to do something about it. And we've got wins from that. So we're all responsible for this. But again, I don't think we should be thrown onto the young junior nurses. I think we all need to collectively take a responsibility for it as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Alan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day today to be with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Conversation and finding out a little bit more about what you do and some really insightful tips there. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone's understood my accent.
I can understand it, and I'm pretty much Australian with a little bit of Scottish.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
And you'll be listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters. We look forward to having you join us on our next episode. Bye for now.